Fame, wealth, and glamour often feel like a protective shield against the real world. Celebrities are adored by millions, live in guarded mansions, and travel in luxury. But even the brightest spotlight cannot keep out the darkness that lurks beyond our understanding. Ghosts, spirits, and the unexplained don't care how many fans you have, or how many zeros are in your bank account. In fact, some might argue that the rich and famous are even more vulnerable. They spend time in ancient hotels, historic mansions, and film on eerie locations where tragedy once struck. They explore the edges of reality to play roles, take risks others wouldn't, and sometimes they open doors that should have stayed shut. This story is not about fiction. It's about true encounters, 3 chilling events that happened to 3 different celebrities, each more terrifying than the last. These stories didn't come from some horror movie set or overactive imagination. They came from people who were used to controlling the narrative but were left shaken, terrified, and forever changed. These celebrities have never gone fully public about what happened. A few hints have been dropped in interviews, strange pauses, cryptic remarks, or a quick change of topic when a certain place or event is mentioned. Their publicists shut down questions. Their fans speculate online. But the truth has never been told in full until now. These are their stories. The first happened to a global pop star known for her electrifying stage performances and viral music videos. During the height of her world tour, she checked into a luxury hotel in New Orleans known more for its grandeur than its ghost stories, at least to the public. What she experienced there was enough to make her leave in the middle of the night, shaking, refusing to ever return. To this day, she won't even fly over Louisiana. The second belongs to a once iconic actor who ruled Hollywood in the 90s. After retiring from the spotlight, he purchased a sprawling Victorian mansion in the Hollywood Hills, looking for peace. What he found instead was a curse buried under decades of dust and forgotten tragedy. The house changed him, and some say it never let go. The third involves a young actress whose breakout role came from a supernatural horror film. Ironically, it was while playing a possessed girl that she became haunted for real. Her transformation wasn't just on camera. She started acting strange between takes, spoke in a voice that wasn't hers, and eventually had to abandon the movie altogether. What happened on that set has never been fully explained, and the crew still refuses to talk about it. These 3 stories aren't connected by location or time, but by one chilling truth. The paranormal doesn't care who you are. Some say these things only happen to people who believe. But all 3 of these celebrities were skeptics until their encounters forced them to face something terrifyingly real. They were left shaken, scarred, and forever changed. You're about to hear what really happened. No PR spin, no rehearsed interview lines. Just raw, terrifying truth. So turn down the lights. Listen closely. Because these true ghost stories may just convince you that fame means nothing when the dead decide to show themselves. Her name was Lila Rose, the chart-topping pop sensation known for her glittering costumes, electric stage presence, and powerful voice. She had just wrapped up a sold-out concert in Houston, Texas, and was scheduled to perform next in New Orleans. It was just another stop on her international tour. Just another city. Another luxury hotel suite. Another night. But this night would be different. The hotel she stayed in was the La Belladone, an opulent 5-star hotel located in the French Quarter. It had been around for over 100 years, originally a private estate turned into a luxury establishment. Its marble floors, chandelier-lit hallways, and velvet drapes whispered of old money and deep secrets. Lila's team had chosen it for its privacy and elegance, not knowing, or perhaps ignoring, the ghost stories whispered by the locals. Lila checked into the presidential suite late in the evening. Her assistant, security, and stylist were staying in adjacent rooms. As always, she went through her nightly routine, removing her makeup, sipping herbal tea, and reviewing notes for the next show. But she noticed something strange almost immediately. The mirror in the bathroom seemed off. Every time she passed it, she felt a cold draft that didn't match the warm, humid air of the room. At first, she dismissed it as bad air circulation or her mind playing tricks after a long day. But then things started escalating. Her hairbrush went missing. She always kept it next to the sink, but now it was gone. Her assistant swore no one had touched it. The faucet in the sink would randomly start dripping even though it was tightly closed. The lights flickered just enough to be annoying, but never long enough to seem supernatural. It was after midnight when she heard the whispering. It came from the mirror. She had just gotten into bed and turned off the bedside lamp when she heard the soft hiss of a woman's voice. At first, she thought it was coming from the hallway. But when she sat up and listened closely, it was clear the sound was coming from inside her suite. She walked slowly toward the bathroom, her heart pounding louder than any bass drop she'd ever performed to. As she approached the mirror, the whispering stopped. Then something happened that would haunt her forever. In the reflection, she saw herself standing there, but the reflection wasn't moving in sync. Lila froze. Her breathing caught in her throat. The other her in the mirror was staring directly into her eyes, completely still. Then it smiled. She screamed. Her assistant and bodyguard burst into the room within seconds, finding her in a crumpled heap on the floor, pointing at the mirror and sobbing uncontrollably. But the reflection was back to normal, nothing was out of place. Her team assumed it was exhaustion, a breakdown from stress. But Lila knew what she saw. She begged to be moved to a different hotel that night. She left with her team immediately, refusing to even pack her things. Her bags were retrieved by hotel staff the next morning. Lila canceled all press events in New Orleans and flew to Miami ahead of schedule. She never spoke publicly about what happened. In one rare interview, a journalist asked her about the New Orleans concert and the sudden hotel change. She paused, then said, "There are places where you feel watched, where something stares back at you. I don't go to those places anymore." Years later, it was discovered that a woman named Annabelle DuPont, a famous stage actress from the 1920s, had committed suicide in the same room Lila stayed in. Annabelle was known for her obsession with beauty and fame. She reportedly shattered every mirror in her home before her death, claiming they showed her the truth she didn't want to see. Lila has never returned to New Orleans, and the La Belladonna still rents out the presidential suite, but never for more than one night. In the days that followed her terrifying encounter at the La Belladonna Hotel, Lila Rose became a shadow of her former self. The pop star who once thrived on energy, attention, and late-night rehearsals now avoided mirrors entirely. Her team noted the change immediately. She spoke less, smiled rarely, and kept her hotel room lights on at all hours, even during the day. Behind closed doors, her management scrambled to manage the situation. Canceling press events was risky during a tour, but they knew Lila was in no shape to face interviews or cameras. They issued a generic statement about exhaustion and overwork. The media bought it, at least for a while. But whispers began circulating among those close to the tour. Rumors spread between stage crew, dancers, and local staff. They spoke of Lila screaming about a woman in the mirror, of her refusing to enter bathrooms alone, and of the hasty exit from the hotel at 2 a.m. These whispers made their way into fan forums and conspiracy blogs. Speculation went wild. Some fans thought she had a mental breakdown. Others believed it was drug-related. But a small group deep in the internet's darker corners believed something else, that she had seen something. Something real. Lila, of course, said nothing. In one notable moment during a televised interview months later, a host playfully asked if she believed in ghosts. Lila froze. Her smile faltered. For a split second, her eyes darkened. Not with fear, but with the memory of fear. Then she recovered, forcing a laugh. "I believe in locking your hotel room door and keeping the lights on," she replied. It was a line that made fans chuckle. But those who knew what happened behind the scenes didn't laugh. Privately, Lila began consulting with spiritual advisors. Her team arranged meetings with energy healers, psychics, and even a priest at her request. Though she never officially confirmed what happened, her assistant later revealed that Lila had burned sage in every hotel room for the rest of the tour and insisted that all mirrors be covered with cloth wherever she stayed. The most alarming part? She claimed that the entity followed her. Her assistant, who left her team just a year later, shared in an anonymous podcast interview that Lila would often wake up screaming, sometimes shouting at the mirror in her dressing rooms. She once refused to perform at a venue after catching her reflection smile on its own during sound check. And yet, despite the trauma, Lila never went public with the full story. Why? Because in the world of fame, fear is weakness. Image is everything. If the world found out that one of its brightest pop stars had been broken by a ghost in a hotel mirror, her career could suffer. The tabloids would mock her. Skeptics would call her crazy. And the story would be reduced to clickbait, stripped of its reality and turned into entertainment. Her silence was survival. But it wasn't just about reputation. Deep down, Lila was afraid that speaking about it might bring it back. Like naming a curse. Like opening a door she had only just managed to shut. Some things she believed were better left buried. And so, the Real story faded into the background. The hotel never released a statement. The room was quietly renamed and redecorated. Tour staff were instructed never to speak about the incident again. And Lila moved on. At least on the outside. The incident became one of the many unsolved mysteries tied to celebrities. A handful of blogs, YouTube channels, and podcasts still reference the Mirror Room incident, but without solid evidence, it remains urban legend to most. But those who know, those who were there, don't question it. They know what happened in New Orleans. They know Lila Rose saw something that night. And they know it's still watching. For decades, Victor Blackwood was a staple of Hollywood, an actor's actor. He was never the loudest or flashiest star, but his performances left audiences speechless. From hard-boiled detectives to tortured antiheroes, Victor's deep voice and commanding presence made him a legend. By the time he turned 60, he had won 2 Oscars, 5 Golden Globes, and the respect of an entire industry. But Victor didn't like the spotlight. So when he announced his retirement and disappeared from public life, few were surprised. He had always said he wanted to escape the madness of Hollywood, and he did by purchasing a grand Victorian mansion in the hills just outside Los Angeles. The property, hidden behind wrought iron gates and a wall of thick oaks, had been vacant for years. Victor bought it on impulse. The mansion was beautiful in a haunted sort of way. 3 stories tall, with ivy crawling up its stone exterior, the house had the kind of charm you only saw in classic films. Stained glass windows, arched doorways, carved wood banisters, it was straight out of a Gothic romance novel. The real estate agent told Victor it had once belonged to a prominent 1920s family that mysteriously vanished. The place had changed hands several times since, but no one had stayed long. Victor, ever the skeptic, laughed it off. "It's just an old house," he said. "Old houses creak." But what Victor found inside wasn't creaking wood or leaky pipes. It started with the dreams. Every night for the first week, Victor dreamed of a little girl standing at the foot of his bed. She wore a white nightgown, soaked at the bottom as if she had walked through wet grass. She never spoke. She just stared at him with dark, unblinking eyes. In the dream, behind the girl, flames danced across the walls of the house. Victor would wake drenched in sweat. At first, he blamed the stress of the move. Then came the noises. Not typical house noises, no, these were deliberate. Scratching. It came from inside the walls. Long, slow scratches like fingernails dragging across wood. He would follow the sound through the hallways only for it to stop when he got close. One night, he pressed his ear to the wall and heard a whisper. "Find the room." Victor had the house professionally inspected. Nothing was found, no rodents, no faulty wiring, no drafts. His team chalked it up to imagination. But the actor who had spent decades pretending to be brave on screen was starting to feel truly afraid. The final straw came when he discovered the attic. Victor hadn't bothered exploring it at first, it was sealed with heavy chains and a rusted padlock. But after yet another night of dreams and the sound of weeping echoing through the halls, he decided to break it open. Inside, he found a small, sealed nursery. The walls were painted a faded pink. A child's crib sat beneath a cracked window. Dust covered everything, but the air felt wrong. Stale. Heavy. As if something was waiting. On the far wall, scrawled in what looked like chalk, or possibly something darker, were the words, "She never left." Victor stumbled out of the attic and immediately called in a local historian. What he learned made his blood run cold. In 1923, the mansion belonged to the Cartwright family, a wealthy couple and their daughter, Lillian. According to old newspaper clippings, the mother reportedly went mad after the death of her husband and locked the child in the nursery. One night, the house caught fire. The mother's body was recovered, but Lillian's was never found. Locals believed she had died in the fire, but some claimed she had been locked in the attic nursery, and that her spirit remained. Victor left the house the very next day. He never returned, never tried to sell it. The property remains abandoned, overgrown, and tightly locked to this day. A private security firm patrols the area. Curious explorers are turned away. Victor now lives quietly in a small condo in Palm Springs. He hasn't spoken about the mansion publicly, but in a rare podcast interview years later, when asked why he left Hollywood so suddenly, he gave a haunting response. "Fame brings you attention, but silence brings something else. And sometimes it listens back." Victor Blackwood's experience inside the Victorian mansion was just the tip of the iceberg. After fleeing the property and retreating to Palm Springs, he quietly hired a private research team to uncover the full truth behind the house he had nearly lost his mind in. He didn't want the press involved, and he didn't want publicity. What he wanted was understanding. The historian he had consulted earlier had only given him a surface-level summary of the Cartwright family tragedy. But the deeper his team dug into public archives, old court documents, and buried newspaper records, the darker the picture became. The mansion had always been cursed. The land it sat on had a long history of violence, dating back to the mid-1800s, long before the Cartwrights built their home. Local lore spoke of a drifter who murdered an entire pioneer family on the same hilltop and was later lynched by an angry mob. Before he died, he screamed a curse into the wind that anyone who tried to own the hill would lose their own blood to it. No one took that story seriously until Victor's team discovered something eerie. Every single owner of the mansion over the past century had either vanished, died mysteriously, or sold the house and moved far away in a hurry. The Cartwrights were the most tragic case. New evidence showed that Mrs. Cartwright, the mother of the missing girl Lillian, had been suffering from deep postpartum psychosis. Letters found in a storage vault revealed she believed her daughter was not human and that the house spoke to her in dreams. The final letter she wrote before the fire said, "The house wants her. The house needs her. I cannot keep her from it any longer." The fire that destroyed part of the mansion was ruled accidental, but Victor's researchers found discrepancies in the report. The fire had started in the attic nursery, exactly where Lillian had been locked. No remains were ever found. No signs of an escape. Just ashes and silence. More chillingly, the chalk writing Victor found in the attic she never left matched handwriting samples from Mrs. Cartwright's letters. It seemed she had written those words herself, possibly before setting the fire. Victor was horrified. He had believed for a while that the ghost haunting him was the child Lillian. But now he wasn't so sure. What if it wasn't the girl who remained but her mother? Or worse, something else entirely, something that had manipulated the mother, then moved on to Victor? After all, Victor never saw the girl from his dreams anywhere in the house, only in his sleep. What he did feel in the mansion, however, was a presence. Cold, intelligent, malevolent. The scratching in the walls. The whispers. The dream of fire. It all felt orchestrated. There were stories from other short-term residents too. A banker who briefly owned the mansion in the 1980s reportedly threw himself out of the third-floor window 2 months after moving in. His suicide note read only, "She told me to." Another tenant, a silent film actress in the 1940s, had mysteriously disappeared. Her belongings were still in the house when authorities arrived. Her body was never recovered. She had vanished without a trace, just like Lillian. Victor became obsessed. He stopped sleeping. He started drawing the same window from the nursery over and over in his journals. He tried to write about it, to script a screenplay based on the house, but every draft ended the same way. The final scene would describe the viewer looking into a mirror and something looking back. He eventually gave up. In a final desperate act, Victor hired a spiritual medium to investigate the house. She only stayed in the mansion for 3 hours. When she came out, she was shaking uncontrollably. She refused payment. All she said before leaving was, "It's not a ghost. It's a hunger." Victor burned all the documents related to the mansion a few weeks later. The only thing he kept was a single black and white photograph of the nursery window taken just before the attic was sealed again. In the photo, in the faintest outline, there appeared to be a face not of a child but of a twisted figure with hollow eyes. He never spoke of it again. The mansion still sits at the edge of the hills, hidden from view, guarded and empty. And inside it, something still waits. At first glance, Tori Vance seemed like someone nothing could scare. Known for her loud personality and no-nonsense attitude, Tori made a name for herself on reality TV as the tough girl on a survival competition show. She once slept in a jungle during monsoon season, wrestled a snake for camera ratings, and laughed in the face of staged haunted house challenges. But her bravado would crumble in a remote section of Oregon wilderness. Off camera, far from any audience. It began with a spontaneous trip. After wrapping her 3rd season of Queen of the Wild, Tori decided to take a real vacation. No producers, no film crew, just her and 2 friends. Her assistant Kim and her old college roommate Jared. They picked a location known to hikers as Deadwater Woods, a forest near Mount Hood surrounded by dense pine trees and whispers of old legends. The name didn't bother Tori. In fact, it made her laugh. "It's just woods," she said. Trees don't scare me. They packed light. Tents, a satellite phone, emergency rations. Tori insisted they camp at the most remote point on the map, a clearing said to be completely untouched by man. It was a 6-hour hike from the last gravel road. They set up camp as the sun began to dip, a golden haze falling across the silent woods. That silence was the first warning. There were no birds, no insects, no wind rustling through the trees. Just a deep, oppressive quiet that made Jared comment, "It's like the forest is holding its breath." That night, things got strange. Around 1 a.m., they were all asleep when a sound jolted them awake, a high-pitched scream, long and unnatural, echoing through the trees. Not human, not animal. It sounded like something in pain or in rage. Tori jumped out of her tent with a flashlight. Kim followed, shaking. They scanned the woods. Nothing. Then the scream came again. Closer. They packed up immediately, panic setting in. But in their rush, they realized the path they had taken into the forest had changed. The trees looked wrong. Landmarks were missing. The trail they had followed for hours was gone. Tori's survival training kicked in. She tried to keep calm, organizing their gear and marking trees as they walked. But every direction they turned, the forest seemed to twist. Time became a blur. Their compasses spun uselessly. The satellite phone refused to connect. And the scream kept coming. At one point, they found their own footprints, circling back to the same clearing they had left an hour earlier. Something was wrong. Something didn't want them to leave. On the second night, Jared vanished. He had gone to relieve himself just 20 feet from camp. 1 minute he was there. The next, nothing. No sound. No cry for help. Tori found his flashlight still on the ground, its beam pointed into the trees. She screamed his name until her voice cracked. Nothing answered except for the scream. Now it was closer than ever. Tori and Kim huddled together until morning. Kim was nearly catatonic by sunrise, mumbling about a woman with no eyes watching them from the trees. Tori refused to give up. She tied Kim's hand to hers with a rope and forced them to keep walking. Hours passed. Days blurred. Their food ran out. They began hallucinating, at least Tori hoped it was hallucination. At one point, she saw Jared standing in the woods, but he wasn't blinking, and his mouth was open in a silent scream. On the 4th day, they stumbled into a ranger's outpost, delirious and half-starved. Tori never told the ranger what happened in detail. Neither did Kim. Jared was never found. Search teams combed the woods for a week. No sign. No tracks. No body. When Tori returned to LA, she was different. She quit her show. She deleted her social media. In her only interview about the incident, she said, "There's something in those woods. Something that mimics us. Something that screams when it knows you're alone." She refused to elaborate further. Kim never spoke publicly again. Locals in Oregon say the scream can still be heard on cold nights. High, shrill, and human, but not quite. And the forest? It remains untouched, as if whatever's in there is keeping it that way. Despite their fame, wealth, and confidence, none of the 3 celebrities who encountered the supernatural walked away unchanged. In fact, their brushes with the unknown left deeper scars than any camera could capture, transforming how they lived, how they saw the world, and in some cases, who they were at their core. 1. Amelia Hart, the haunted hotel's echo after her terrifying night in the haunted hotel. Amelia Hart never performed in a horror film again. In fact, she withdrew from the genre entirely. Interviews she had already agreed to were canceled. She took a sudden break from acting, disappearing from the public eye for nearly a year. Her fans assumed she was simply burned out. But behind the scenes, Amelia was struggling. She spoke in therapy sessions about feeling watched constantly, especially in dark rooms. She developed a fear of elevators. Her assistant reported seeing Amelia flinch at the sound of old-fashioned telephones or bells, reminders of the hotel lobby. The sleepwalking episodes didn't stop either. Even in her own home, she would wake up in different rooms, cold and confused. She began filming herself at night to understand what was happening. In one clip, she was seen standing in front of her mirror at 3:17 a.m., murmuring the words "Room 413" over and over. She has since sold that house. Eventually, Amelia returned to the screen, but in romantic dramas and lighthearted comedies only. In one talk show appearance years later, when a host jokingly asked if she'd ever stay in a haunted hotel again, her smile faltered. "I didn't stay," she said softly. "It stayed with me." 2. Victor Blackwood. The mansion that watches Victor Blackwood's retreat from acting was abrupt, but his silence afterward was even more shocking. Once known for his deep, thoughtful interviews and passion for storytelling, he became reclusive. His Palm Springs condo had blackout curtains drawn 24/7. Neighbors said he barely left his house. His friends tried to reach out, but most received polite refusals. Only his closest confidant, a director he had worked with for years, was allowed to visit. That director described Victor as a man haunted by something he couldn't name. "He told me," the director said later in an interview, "that the house didn't just scare him, it knew him, it read his memories, it used them against him, and worst of all, it missed him." Victor reportedly had all his mirrors covered. He wrote in journals constantly, though no one knows what was in them. When he passed away quietly at the age of 78, his lawyer revealed that Victor's final request was that no photo of him ever be displayed or published again. Among his belongings, they found a single item wrapped in silk, the old photograph of the nursery window. The faint face in the glass had grown darker. 3. Tori Vance. The scream that never ends. Tori Vance's transformation was the most dramatic. Once the face of a bold survival brand, she dissolved all contracts and erased her presence from the entertainment industry. Her wilderness gear line was shut down. Her show was canceled after she walked away during the filming of a promo shoot, saying she heard the scream again. Friends described her as paranoid. She refused to be outdoors after sundown. She always kept her lights on, even when sleeping. Kim, the assistant who had survived the forest with her, cut ties completely. Some say the two had a falling out after Kim claimed she still saw Jared, sometimes standing in corners when no one else was home. Tori moved to a quiet seaside town in Maine and bought a house with no surrounding woods. She adopted 3 dogs and installed cameras in every room. But despite her precautions, she still sometimes posted strange messages online in the middle of the night, cryptic tweets like, "The trees remember. The scream has a face. There's something older than fear. We woke it up." Her last post before deactivating all accounts was a video clip from inside her house. It showed her staring silently out the back window. In the reflection behind her, something tall and pale was watching. These weren't tabloid tales or publicity stunts. There were no books written, no big interviews revealing the truth. Each celebrity dealt with the aftermath differently, some quietly, some with visible cracks. But the experiences they had were real. And if you ask them, if you catch them on the right night, when they think no one's listening, they'll all say the same thing: fame is fleeting. But some things follow you forever. Ghost stories are often dismissed as entertainment. We tell them around campfires or dramatize them in movies. They're fuel for thrill seekers, late-night chills, and spooky YouTube channels. But every so often, a story comes along that doesn't feel like fiction. It feels lived. That's what makes the encounters of Amelia Hart, Victor Blackwood, and Tori Vance so unsettling. These weren't unknown names, eager for attention. They were celebrities, people with reputations to protect, brands to manage, and careers built on public perception. They had everything to lose by admitting that they saw, heard, or felt something that couldn't be explained. And yet, they all changed after their experiences. Not in ways that scream ghost sighting or possessed, but in small, undeniable shifts. Retreating from the spotlight. Developing strange fears. Avoiding certain places, certain times of night. Talking less. Trusting less. Sleeping less. When we take a step back from the details, the haunted hotel, the cursed mansion, the screaming forest, we see a disturbing pattern. Each of these places chose their victims. It wasn't random. It wasn't by accident. These weren't curious tourists stumbling into trouble. These were people drawn into something deeper, something personal. And maybe that's what makes their stories so terrifying. Because they show us that hauntings don't always happen in the dead of night or with flickering lights. Sometimes they sneak in through dreams. Sometimes they speak in familiar voices. Sometimes they follow you home. Let's think about it. Amelia was drawn to the hotel's theatrical history only to discover a script she couldn't control. Victor wanted a peaceful retreat but found a place that fed on memory and silence. Tori sought adventure and solitude but ended up hunted by something older than language. Each of them walked into these places confident and unafraid. Each of them left changed. So, what does it mean? Maybe ghosts aren't just dead people stuck between worlds. Maybe they're echoes, memories so strong they bend time, places so charged with pain that reality gets thin. Maybe they're warnings. Traps. Or maybe they're not ghosts at all, but something else entirely. Entities that feed on attention, on fear, on people who carry a light too bright, like celebrities. Because here's a chilling thought: what if fame attracts more than fans? What if the same energy that draws millions to a person, the magnetism, the charisma, the intensity, is like a beacon in the dark, attracting things that shouldn't be watching? It's no coincidence that so many actors, musicians, and reality stars tell stories like these. Maybe their lives, so full of extremes, make them more vulnerable. Or maybe the camera doesn't just show the world who they are. Maybe it opens a window, one that something else can look through, one that never quite closes again. Final warning: if you're ever walking alone and hear a whisper with no voice. If your hotel room door unlocks by itself in the middle of the night. If you look in the mirror and your reflection lags behind. Remember this: it's not always your imagination. And if it is, be thankful. Because once something real finds you, like it found them, it won't let go.